Hey guys, welcome to eDogs Tech Support. Thank you so much for watching my first video. My name is Easton, and today I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of what my home IT lab infrastructure looks like, as well as some of the services I have set up. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first part of this video, I'm going to be talking about the Active Directory users and computer structure that I have set up. As you can see, I have a bunch of different organizational units set up for admin accounts, domain controllers, some of my assets like computers and printers, which I don't have any currently, some miscellaneous servers like my SCCM server, some security groups, some service accounts. I've only got BitLocker administration set up for now, as well as a bunch of different user groups for each department, like accounting, auditing, corporate, and so on and so forth. So for my domain structure, I want it to be as granular as possible because when I'm setting up things like group policies in Azure Active Directory, it's a lot easier to filter out groups and employees and apply only certain group policies to certain groups based on those organizational units. So for example, if I wanted to create a policy that applies to all employees that I have in my domain, I would put it under this users folder, so that way it applied to everybody in every single one of these folders. And then if I wanted to apply a rule only to the accounting department, I would put it under this folder so it only applies to these employees and it doesn't affect any other employee in the infrastructure. So that's a brief overview of what my Active Directory structure looks like, and this is actually how I recommend that you set yours up if you are looking into setting up your own IT lab, because it's a lot easier to already have all of these set up and separated than to try and filter these out after the fact. Because when you get into group policies, you're going to want to be switching those over to different folders and then making sure that those apply properly. If you set up reports on Azure Active Directory, you'll probably have to reset those up as well as the filters. And so I just recommend that you have it already set up this way so you don't have to worry about that later down the road. So yeah, the next thing I'm going to be talking about is group policy and what I've set up for my infrastructure. So this is what my group policy looks like, and I know I don't have most of these in two separate subfolders as I mentioned earlier. However, most of these policies do apply to specific users in specific security groups that I've already pre-assigned as noted here. So I didn't really feel like it was that necessary, and any of the policies that are in the top of my domain, I do want to apply to the rest of the computers and users anyways. So we'll go down some of these group policies that I've set up on my domain. One of them is allow remote desktop. So the members of RDP allow listed here all have access to remote desktop into any machine within my organization, including domain controllers as well as other PCs that I have set up. This is just because all of these users are in IT or they are an administrative user. And any of the other group policies that I show you, I'll just let you know what group they apply to because each of these groups do have members in them, tailored based on what department they are in. As you can see, IT, most of these, like the network engineers, they're only for the members who are network engineer techs. So as you can see, they're the same users that I have listed here, and so on and so forth. The next group policy I have one set up for USB read-only, so only members of the certain USB read-only group, they only have read permission for any sort of removable storage device. I also have one set up for BG info, so that way I can kind of see information about the computer I'm remoted into, even though I normally know, but it's just something that I set up. The next one I have is for default desktop icon. So I currently have one on there to force a GP update that anybody can run. I just have that set up on there because I like to make a lot of changes and I just like to run immediate updates without having to go into command prompt and typing in the command each time. I also have my default domain controller policy. I also have an enforced policy for deny USB access. So pretty much if a user has deny USB access and they have allow USB read-only, the deny one is going to take priority, just to ensure that somebody didn't accidentally apply both or apply one when they shouldn't have. And so that you can see here, these are all enabled. So deny all access enabled. It's kind of a paradox, but that's how that's set up. The next one is deploy Zoho Assist. So this is my remote desktop service that I use and that I prefer just because it's very inexpensive and I can have unlimited technicians. You might be saying, you know, well, I could use remote desktop to just remote into any computer. While it is true, sometimes I do like to work on this away from home, and I do have a VPN set up, but sometimes I'd rather just connect through a native client like Zoho Assist. And as you can see, I have a script set up to automatically install it. So essentially this will run one time, and if I join a new computer to the domain, it's going to automatically install the agent without requiring a technician to manually install it. So that's very nice to have, just so that way if it's something I forget to set up, the system's already going to do that for me. The next one I have set up is disable local administrator account. Just a default policy that I'm sure most organizations have set up, at least from what I've seen. The local administrator account is just completely disabled entirely from the machine. And so that's just something that I had set up. The next one I have is disable real-time protection. This is because normally I run all of my files and any sort of testing on a virtual machine. I normally don't test on actual hardware, just to protect myself, as well as I don't need some of these policies applying to my actual personal computers. And so normally the files I download are safe. I usually check them before I download them, see where they're from, just make sure that they don't have any malware. So I normally don't have an issue with this. So I just turn it off just because sometimes there are files that are mistakenly marked as malicious even though they're not. And so rather than having the system delete them automatically, I just turn that off so I don't have to worry about that. The next one I have is domain admins are local admins. So you don't want to assign too many people the domain admin role just because it's very privileged and they can do a lot with that role. So there's only a few users that have the domain admin, so it's myself, of course, and then as well as one other user. And then I do have some service accounts that are set up like that, but normally you would be more specific with what permissions they can have just so you don't have to worry about that. But that is something that I enforce, so that way if I go on a computer or if that other user goes on the computer, they're technically a local admin of the machine, so they don't have to worry about typing in their credentials. The next one I have is enable remote desktop. So what this policy is it's different from the allow RDP because the allow RDP is to allow only certain users and groups to be able to remote desktop into other machines, but this policy actually enables the functionality of being able to remote into the machine at all. So that's what this policy is. You could say that I could probably tie this into the same as the other one, but just so that way I can organize it and try and figure out, if there's something wrong, I just know that it's this specific policy that enables the functionality. So if I ever need to fix something, I'll just go into this specific policy. The next one I have is some firewall for open SCCM ports. When you set up SCCM, you have to open up some ports. So that's all that is. I do have an internet setup as well that I won't show. Next one I have is some mapped network drives. So pretty much I have a bunch of these drive letters set up for different departments. So as you can see, I have HCM, marketing, network engineers, auditing, so on and so forth. Just so that way each department has their own folder that if they want to, put files and documents into, they can just share it with the rest of their team. The next one I have is restrict RDP. So this applies to specific users in this profile. That just so that they don't allow it. You could just say that instead of actually assigning them the allow, just don't assign it at all. However, I like to make my policies more specific. So if they're part of this group, if somebody's looking at that user, they can say, oh, they're restricted from allowing it because it says so in their membership. Rather than saying, oh, they forgot to add it. no, this way it's technically shown that it was intentionally set to be restricted for that user. So that's kind of why I have that set up. And like I said, I have that enforced. So that way, if a user has both RDP allow and restrict, the restrict is going to take precedent in case there's an issue. And if in a real world scenario, the user would say, hey, why can't I remote in? We'll look and see they have both. And then at that point, we would then verify, should they actually have permission to remote desktop into a machine. So that's what that policy is. The next one I have is some trusted file types. These are just some file types that I have trusted within my organization. So that's all that is. And then I also have a wireless network policy just for my own home network. So I won't show that as well. And then I also have a VPN set up for all of my computers. And then I also have a taskbar policy as well. So that's a brief overview of what my group policy structure looks like. Next, I'll be talking about Microsoft Office 365 and some of the services that I've set up. So the next thing that I did set up was Microsoft Office 365, and the way that I kind of tandem in all of my users with this program is through Azure Active Directory Connect. So I do have all of the same users set up in here as well, just with Active Directory Connect right here. Just so that way it's a lot easier. I don't have to manually add users. I can just kind of have all of that seamless. And as well as the licenses that I've set up, I already set them up to match what membership they have. So for example, this user, they are a member of Office 365, and so they actually are automatically assigned an Office 365 license within Office, so I don't actually have to worry about that. So it's a very nice feature to have. So I just set that up just so that way I can have some extra services and some extra business-like functionality within my structure. With setting up Office 365, another thing that I have kind of configured a little bit is the Exchange Admin Center. So in a production environment, there would be a lot more rules and security implementations in place. So some of the common ones that I've added was warn about external emails. So if there's ever an email that comes from outside of my own domain, it's just going to prepend this disclaimer: do not click any links or open attachments unless you recognize the sender and know the content is safe. And then I also had one set up for emails going outside of the organization, just kind of telling people, that the information in that email is confidential and, the typical legal information that you would normally see if you're emailing a larger company. And then I also have some blocked senders and domains set up, as well as a report that would generate if there's sensitive info detected within the organization that's being sent out or sent within the organization. So I just have those set up, and I also have some group mailboxes set up as well, just so I can get a kind of feel for all different types of Exchange administration, mailbox policies, rules, and like distribution groups as well, just so that way I can get a feel for pretty much anything that an organization would normally set up, just so that way I have an understanding of how it all works and how it all ties together. So with that, another thing that I have set up within my organization is Azure Privileged Identity Management. So some of these users do have privileged roles that they do have to request each time that they want to access them. And some of them do require approval from somebody else. So for example, the security administration role that's over here, they require approval from higher management, just because it's kind of a secured role to me. But then there are also some users that have it permanently because it's just part of their job. So I do have some access with that as well. And another thing that I have set up is every single user within my organization is required to have multi-factor authentication set up on their account, just because I like all of my accounts to be secure. And typically, if you're in an organizational environment, normally that same policy would also apply to them as well. Just because multi-factor authentication is very important to security if you want to keep your accounts secure within your organization. Just in case somebody happens to get the password to one of these accounts, I don't want them to be able to adjust any of my organizational settings. The next thing that I've set up within my organization is mobile device management. So currently I only have one device to test it out with, and that's my own personal phone. So what I did is I enrolled it, and I also set up some compliance configurations for the passcode, a different compliance policy, some device configurations such as my network, and some other restrictions that I put in place just to test it out, just to kind of see what it's like. I also implemented a policy that this device needs to be enrolled if you want to access Teams and Outlook on your mobile device. If it's not enrolled, you won't be able to access company resources. So I just wanted to set that up just to kind of test out all the features and all the restrictions that could be put in place, just so that way I have a feel for knowing what's possible and what isn't possible when it comes to managing an iOS device within an organization. The next thing I wanted to go over very quickly was I do have some experience with some attack simulation training as well. So I've pretty much done some simulations on my fake mailboxes that I've set up. Usually I'm really good at detecting phishing emails. I don't think I've ever clicked on one in any of my companies, just because to me they all seem very obvious. You gotta look for the normal things like do you know who the sender is? Are you expecting it? Does it make sense? Did they change their name to be one thing when their email address is actually something else? Did you check the hyperlink? Just all of those things I kind of consider when looking at an email that I don't recognize or I don't know who it's from. So I just wanted to play around with the simulation training just to kind of see how that works. I know in a real life environment, there would be a different program that companies may use for their training, but this is, of course, the only free option that I could get, and it was included with my trial. So I took advantage of it and I checked it out just a little bit. So I do have some experience with that. So the last thing I want to talk about as far as services that I've set up is the only external service I set up and currently use constantly is this Zoho Assist that I mentioned earlier. And I just really like this program because it's very native to the system. It works perfectly fine wherever I'm at, whether I'm already here or if I'm away or if I'm trying to access it on my phone. And I just love it because I don't need to use a VPN to connect to these sites. And another feature that I really liked about it is I can set a bunch of different technicians. So in this case, I have all of my users within the information technology group. They are technically technicians. Now, most of these haven't actually accepted the invitation just because, they're fake email addresses, but, the domain belongs to me. But I did want to play around with some, like these are the technicians. So I have two different roles. And then another one I have set up is for admins, like it's me, and then as well as another user, just to play around with the permissions. Because when I look at permissions, I like to assign the least amount of permissions that a user needs that they require each day, just because I don't want to give somebody access to more than what they really need. So that's why I really like this program, because it's unlimited technicians. I believe it's like $15 a month, and you can get, I think, 20 computers, or it's $10, 15 computers, something like that. But you can get unlimited technicians if you want to play around with that, play around with the permissions. And it also, I just really liked it because I could set up a deployment on it through different means. So what I did is I used the group policy object. In this case, this user doesn't have permission to deploy that, but when I did deploy it, I was on an administrative account. So yeah, those are all the services that I've set up as far as externally goes. I have worked with other services like Jira, Manage Engine, as well as ServiceNow. So, however, those trials are actually ended, and then I do also have some experience with website administration. Normally, I draw the line at coding. I can't code. I can't do Python. I can't do C++. I can't do any of that. I'm more of like a sysadmin, SCCM, deployments, permissions type of person. So this is what my home IT lab looks like. It's something that I've been managing for a couple months now. I've had a couple different other labs as well, but this is the one that I've really took off and really started setting up a bunch of different services and connecting them. So I'm going to consider this one as my main home IT lab that I continue and plan to work on going forward. So if you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments below, or if you want to reach out to me and know a little bit more, feel free to message me. I'm usually pretty responsive, so I'll get to it as quick as I can. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. My future videos will be more based around instructional guides and how-tos on how to set up some of the policies and services that I've set up on my lab. Mostly because I understand that there are plenty of videos out there currently, but I want to create a video for myself, just to also prove to others my competency and that I understand how to set up the services that I've set up. And then also, if people are commenting, asking questions, I can then use that as a learning opportunity to teach myself a few things that maybe I didn't know, or maybe learn some more efficient ways to do some of the tasks that I've been doing manually, just from other users. So I definitely want this to be a open community within my channel, and I want to be very open-minded and welcome anybody who wants to voice their opinion or have any ideas that they want to shoot my way. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me.